Bonnet. I want to bounce from Nick in Berlin back to Munich. I want to bring in Olena Prokopenko, who is Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund, former advisor to Ukraine's Minister of Finance as well. Olena, great to talk to you. First, let me ask you, given the last 24 hours, has the US government thrown the Ukrainian president under a bus?
Well, I believe that the results of this conference have been primarily positive for Ukraine, if we may say so, given that everything is so much in flux still and the negotiation positions are still very much changing. And I wouldn't even say that the parties have their negotiation positions nearly ready. So when we look at the outcomes of the meeting between President Zelensky and US Vice President Vance, I would say that this meeting was more successful than we had expected, because as you Vice President Vance was almost ready, along with President Trump, to give Russia leadership in these negotiations, meaning that the sequence of the phone calls that President Trump had with Putin, then with Zelensky, and the general rhetoric was extremely concerning and alarming, I would even say. And when Vice President Vance met with President Zelensky, the outcome of that meeting was extremely different from what was expected, because he basically said that the U.S. is looking for sustainable peace, and this is the main message of the Ukrainian side, and that even troops on the ground are an option if needed, if Russia sabotages the negotiations.
You've struck upon something very interesting, because I want to listen to this. The very different face between the sound and fury often we're hearing publicly, perhaps to a domestic audience, it is argued, and what we're hearing in background briefs, what Europeans are hearing in background briefs. Firstly, I want to hear from Olaf Scholz, who hits back against that speech and how he sees it interfering. I also want to then listen to Kaja Kallas, the EU chief foreign diplomat.
That is why we will not accept outsiders intervening in our democracy, in our elections, in the democratic formation of opinion in favour of this party. You can't do that, especially not between friends and allies. We firmly reject this. We will decide for ourselves what happens for our democracy.
We have had good meetings with the Americans. Inside the rooms, they are saying that they continue with NATO, we are good allies, and these are the messages that we also want to hear, that we are in this together. Of course, publicly, they are also acting, and addressing their domestic public, which is sometimes a bit different.
OK, Olena, it seems we're kind of in a Lewis Carroll world here, but where everything seems a little upside down. You get told something in public and it might mean something separate in private. You just hit upon that. Let's go back to the deal as well, because very little has come out about what is in this deal, which was first suggested by Volodymyr Zelensky, the idea of US access to rare earth minerals. What's your understanding of what actually happened and why it's been turned down?
I think that the deal is not ready. I think that the U.S. government acted extremely fast. The finance minister of the United States came to Ukraine almost immediately after this proposal was even voiced. And President Zelensky, I think, was quite open and accommodating to consider this deal. And he was ready to discuss it. But at the same time, we cannot accept any deals, economic or political or security deals, that do not provide security guarantees that Ukraine is asking for. So while it can be a mutually beneficial cooperation point on the rare earths between the US and Ukraine, it cannot be a replacement for credible security guarantees, meaning uninterrupted supply of weapons that Ukraine has been asking for, and availability of these weapons in Ukraine in case Russia decides to invade again. We also need boots on the ground, and I'm glad that this is now not off the table, at least, and this is even discussed by Vice President Vance. So I think the main point here is that we should not take an economic deal for something that needs to be a robust security cooperation. And we need NATO membership, but if Ukraine cannot become a member of NATO in the near future, the second best could be a similar alliance with the European major powers and with the US, in order to make sure that Russia does not just take a break from this war and then has sanctions lifted and then regroups and comes back again to wage an even more bloody war in the larger Europe.
It's a narrative as well, Olena, we've heard in the past many times, isn't it? French President Emmanuel Macron previously saying that there should be a European army. There's lots of pushback, lots of different leaders, including when the UK was in Europe, against that idea. What do you think that this kind of plea to Europe, the call to arms from Volodymyr Zelensky does? Do you think it actually puts fresh impetus, more serious talks that something could happen separate to NATO?
I think Ukraine realizes the sense of urgency more than anyone else at the moment for very tragic reasons. But I think President Zelensky is sounding the alarm, and I hope that this conference can become or has already become a wake-up call for Europe in the sense that there is literally no time to waste. I think we've never been any closer to seeing the victory of dictatorships over the democratic world as we know it. And I think Europe has to take the message that Vice President Vance was trying to convey, and Russia's messages as well, because Russia, as we know, yesterday conducted a missile attack on Ukraine's Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and this is a very clear message that it wants to both terrorize Ukraine into submission and capitulation, but it also wants to use this blackmailing chip in order to put pressure on the U.S. to strike a deal disastrous for everyone, but good for Russia. So I think this message was taken, and I think Europe is in need of moving very fast when it comes to creating European armed forces. And I'm glad that there is a new defense commissioner in the European Commission, and this is an important sign as well.
Good to talk to you, Olena. Very, very interesting. And we're going to talk to our Russian affairs analyst on how Moscow is seeing this, as you referred to, in just a moment. Olena Prokopenko, thank you so much, from the Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund.